My family, welcome to yet another one. So when President Trump was elected the President of America,
there might have been so many factors that caused him to win, but there might be only one thing that God said, I'm choosing him. The world had lost its canvas. We're playing with a certain demonic agenda. For you to think that congresswomen and congressmen can be asked what is a boy and can't answer. How can a boy be a girl and a girl be a boy? In America, consistently, they are losing morals. So the idea of God was simple. And we need a spiritual reset because of moral decadence. Trump is a Cyrus. And Cyrus was used by God. Doesn't mean that he himself is of God. The character that God is looking for is, can I send him to reset things? We are looking at the principles. Some of them line up with scripture. We are not saying he is the Savior Jesus Christ. We are not saying God is a card-carrying member for a political party. Never. What we are saying is, he is giving back power to the church. It's a strategy of God.
So that was Prophet Angel as he was highlighting the spiritual reason why Trump actually won the elections. And this is a very important prophetic warning that he has been sharing over and over.
When it comes to President Trump, it is the same call that I gave you. Let's pray for President Trump. Because those who want him to end have not stopped. And I saw meeting with Judas, people sitting down, trying to see how they can limit his power, reduce his power. But if it fails, they're still on the same passage to try to drop him. That's what they're doing right now, to cause chaos everywhere so that it will be very difficult for him to govern. But the Lord said, I know what I'm doing. I have made a reset. So pray, because they are setting structures to try and limit his power. They are setting structures to try and buy even people to buy them so that they have few people supporting whatever they want to change.
And you know, recently there's actually a video that came out where we have General Flynn, who's actually been in the army, you can correct me if I'm wrong, who came out to say that there are issues of concern that he wants to highlight.
The life of the president, I really worry about him sometimes, you know, when he's out there. He's such a people person, and he wants to be around people, that I want to make sure that the Secret Service is doing everything that it can to protect that man's life, because we need him for the full amount of time that he's got remaining as president of the United States.
And before I get to what the other thing he actually said, let me play this prophecy for you from Brother Brandon.
The Lord said all the way going into the 4th of July, praying into this time frame. And people said, Brendan, did you say many 9/11s? I said, they're small, but many is what I saw. Many 9/11s. This is where I saw 1,000 men that were operatives from country, not terrorists, an actual group of men that were trained people.
And to my shock, this thing that he's actually warning people about is what the general is actually also warning people about.
Number one, I really do feel like we are facing a potential, something that makes 9/11 look like a church, like a small church fire. And I hope that I'm wrong. I pray that I'm wrong, but the indications and warnings across the board. And that's just solely from my own, experiences and research of open source information. What I worry about is that the president is not being briefed by those organizations fully. What we are seeing across the country, they were brought here by during the Biden administration. And in some cases, they have infiltrated into different parts of our country, in counties and in states, and certainly into the federal government. So the capabilities to do severe damage to different parts of our sectors within our country, the electronic sector, the telecommunications sector, and also just to cause chaos. Well, if there's going to be some type of an attack that's going to make 9/11 look like a church fire, then why? The whole purpose is to sow chaos, to continue to disrupt the ability for President Donald J. Trump, to continue to do the things that he wanted to do and he set out to do as president of the United States, that we, the people, gave him the authority to do.
You're predicting a new mega 9/11 potentially in the next 90 days.
Yeah, it's never the last thing that happened, okay? It's not like we're going to be needing to watch for planes in the sky. It is a combination of things, because they have found a massive number of vulnerabilities in the sort of the body of America. And those vulnerabilities are, in some cases, our inability to respond to chaos and complex operations. And if they're trained in complex operations, which they are, small teams, small elements, dispersed in a wide pattern all over the United States of America.
So that's very interesting. Let me play this statement again for you.
The whole purpose is to sow chaos, to continue to disrupt the ability for President Donald J. Trump, to continue to do the things that he wanted to do and he set out to do as president of the United States, that we, the people, gave him the authority to do.
The reason I played that for you is, you can safely say Prophet Angel actually said this months ago, that such plans are in place.
That's what they're doing right now, to cause chaos everywhere so that it will be very difficult for him to govern.
So all we can say is this is coming. And there's also another prophetic warning that was released by Brother Brandon.
As I was praying over J.D. Vance and what I heard, the Lord said, you're seeing ahead of time. It has not happened yet. I said Watergate, a modern day Watergate. And he said, pray into this.
And for those who are ignorant, of the Watergate scandal, let me just share the video with you.
The story includes espionage, burglary, kidnapping, corruption at the literal highest level. This story is wild.
On June 17, 1972, 5 men were arrested for breaking into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate Hotel and Office Complex in Washington, D.C. 2 of the arrested men were discovered to have links to President Richard Nixon's re-election organization. However, the burglars denied being part of some wider political conspiracy. The White House, too, rejected any notion of a connection between the break-in and Nixon's campaign, and derided the whole event as a, quote, third-rate burglary. However, it turned out to be much more. The incident at the Watergate didn't impact President Nixon's campaign. He was re-elected in a landslide in November 1972. But only months later, the true consequences of the Watergate break-in would emerge. The burglars were sentenced for their crime in January 1973, and they weren't happy about it. One of them, former CIA officer E. Howard Hunt, had been demanding large sums of money to buy his silence. Another of the burglars, James McCord, had also been a CIA agent. McCord decided that he wouldn't tolerate being a scapegoat. After sentencing, McCord wrote a letter to the presiding judge revealing that high-ranking Republicans associated with President Nixon had known about the break-in at the Watergate. The letter was a bombshell. Previously, the media had mostly ignored the Watergate break-in and its aftermath, but McCord's letter changed that, and the media started to increase the pressure on President Nixon for accountability and a thorough, independent investigation. Nixon could no longer ignore or dismiss the growing scandal. On April 30th, 1973, in an effort to seem like he was punishing the people responsible for the Watergate break-in, President Nixon requested the resignations of his 2 closest aides, Chief of Staff H.R. Haldeman and his domestic policy advisor John Ehrlichman. Nixon also fired his White House counsel, John Dean. John Dean had suspected that the White House was planning to accuse him as responsible for the Watergate burglary and the subsequent cover-up. To protect himself, Dean started cooperating with Watergate investigators who were working for the U.S. Senate. The Senate began public hearings about the Watergate affair in May 1973. That same month, Harvard law professor Archibald Cox was appointed as an independent special prosecutor, whose job was to examine the whole matter and to press charges as necessary. The following month, former White House counsel John Dean testified to the Senate Watergate Committee. Dean revealed that he discussed with President Nixon the Watergate break-in and the cover-up, including Howard Hunt's demand for hush money. Dean testified that he warned Nixon that the Watergate affair was a, quote, cancer growing on the White House that, if not stopped, could end Nixon's presidency in disgrace. But Nixon ignored Dean's warnings and proceeded to direct the cover-up. Testifying to the Senate in July 1973, Nixon aide Alexander Butterfield confirmed the existence of a tape recording system in the Oval Office of the White House, which Nixon had installed in 1971. That is, everything that was said in the Oval Office was tape recorded. With that astonishing revelation, the next step was clear. The best way for Watergate investigators to find out what Nixon knew and when he knew it was to get hold of those tapes. So the tapes were subpoenaed by both the Senate Watergate Committee and by Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. But Nixon refused to turn the tapes over. In October 1973, Nixon tried to derail the Watergate investigations. Nixon ordered the Attorney General Elliot Richardson to fire Archibald Cox. Richardson resigned rather than comply. So Nixon ordered the Deputy Attorney General, William Ruckelshaus, to fire Cox. Ruckelshaus, too, resigned rather than comply. Finally, Nixon ordered Solicitor General Robert Bork to fire Cox, and Bork did so. What happened? The top 2 law enforcement officers in the country had just resigned to protest Nixon's order to fire the man responsible for investigating possible criminal wrongdoing in the White House. This was the so-called Saturday Night Massacre, and Nixon's drastic efforts to stop Archibald Cox alarmed many Americans. It didn't help that, in the same month, the Vice President of the United States, Spiro Agnew, was forced to resign due to charges of income tax evasion and fraud while governor of Maryland. Congressman Gerald Ford was appointed to be the new vice president according to the provisions of the 25th Amendment. Nixon tried to compensate for his huge mistake with the Saturday Night Massacre by appointing a new prosecutor to replace Cox, but Jaworski simply picked up where Cox left off and demanded that Nixon surrender the Oval Office tape recordings. The pressure on Nixon to come clean was mounting. At the end of April 1974, instead of handing over the tapes, Nixon released edited transcripts of the tape recordings, hoping that doing so would be considered an acceptable compromise. It wasn't. Leon Jaworski sued Nixon to compel Nixon to release the tapes. In July 1974, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Nixon must turn over the tapes. Between July 27th and the 30th of 1974, the House Judiciary Committee adopted 3 articles of impeachment against President Nixon for obstruction of justice, misuse of power, and failure to comply with subpoenas from the House of Representatives. Seeing his position as hopeless, on August 8, 1974, President Nixon announced his resignation in a televised address to be effective the following day. Gerald Ford would become the next president and would thereby have the dubious distinction of being the only man to serve as vice president and president who was not elected to either office. On September 8th, President Ford pardoned Richard Nixon. Ford believed that the best thing for the country was to end the drama and put Watergate in the past. Although at the time Ford was widely criticized for pardoning Nixon, the consensus now is that it was a wise decision. It's never been proven that President Nixon ordered the break-in at the Watergate or knew that it would happen. What has been proven, however, is that Nixon was heavily involved in the cover-up right from the very start. On June 23, 1972, only 6 days after the break-in, Nixon's own taping system recorded him advising his assistants to try to use the CIA to block the FBI's investigation in the Watergate break-in. And Nixon was recorded telling John Dean in March 1973 that secretly obtaining $1 million in hush money for the burglaries wouldn't be a problem, that, quote, I know where it could be gotten. In his oath of office, Richard Nixon had sworn to uphold and protect the Constitution of the United States. But while in office, he actively worked to undermine the rule of law to protect himself and his associates. The consequences of Watergate are still evident in the feelings of alienation and distrust many Americans feel toward their government.
So I hope some of us got educated, so let's continue with the prophecy.
And he said, pray into this. And I saw key strategic people that were involved in this. And when it comes out, they say, I was forced to because of his position.
So here he's still talking about J.D. Vance, right? The Vice President of the United States of America.
And the infection that was the size of a grapefruit that was right above his side, it was oozing out with infection. And the Lord said, scandal. And I saw a strategic knife cutting it and letting the drainage out. But because of what he was trying to do with running for the President of the United States of America in 2028, I heard impeach, impeach, impeach. But they didn't have enough votes to impeach him. But it was enough to keep him out of being what the presidency and the things was that people didn't want to touch it, right? I saw the African-American man with chubby cheeks. But the Lord said specifically, they're grooming a new Obama kind of a person behind the closed doors.
So you heard it, my family. That was very interesting. Some of you were sending me some text, messages saying that he's trying to say that this is tied into the Erica Keck situation, and you are highlighting some of these theories that are all over TikTok.
What I think is happening is you're going to see J.D. Vance's wife disappear soon. Some way, shape, or form. They're going to get a divorce, something. He's going to marry Erica Kirk and solidify the base.
Wow.
Mark my words. Because think about that. And also think about the other thing. I mean, the rumors floating around that now that Charlie's not there, they took the $150 million that they offered Charlie that he turned down.
There was this period in April where Charlie kept insisting to me over and over again that he was going to die young. In fact, he told me that Turning Point USA was going to be the death of him. I'm going to show you some of those messages now. A particular set of messages that were written on April 6th, 2018, just a couple of weeks before Kanye tweeted, as Charlie sensed that something big was about to happen. And I think that is what the something big was. Charlie wrote to me, you're going to be the Iron Lady of America. He had such a political vision for me. I never wanted that sort of a thing. I see it so freaking clearly. I might be Moses, though. I might not see this whole thing through. LMAO. If that is the case, be my David. I said, dude, you haven't even realized your power yet. You're so young, is what I was thinking. He said, if I tell you the true prophecy that I know in my gut, it's really sad, but I hope it's wrong. He went on to say, anyway, I am not sure if I will live to see the end of this revolution. I believe you were the piece that God meant me to meet that will finish the fight. Since the beginning of TPUSA, I knew in my gut that I might get wiped out at any time. I cannot explain it, but I dream about it all the time, like all the time. Anyway, that's depressing combo for another time. I said, that's weird, more of a fear manifestation than actualization. He said, I'm not really afraid of it, but I'm just telling you what I know to be true.
Can anybody explain to me why Erica Kirk was there to swear in the new ambassador to India? Here she is alongside Trump, Vance, and cabinet secretaries as they swear in the new ambassador. Tell me that's not weird. Tell me that's not even weirder that she got a special shout out from the vice president himself.
You got multiple cabinet secretaries, Erica Kirk, the president of the United States.
She got a shout out sandwich between cabinet secretaries and the president of the United States. It's all so weird and just points to how unserious this place has become, this place being the White House. Also, I want to put out another theory. Is it possible that she was there so that she could learn about the culture of a person whose life she's trying to appropriate, whose husband may have caught her eye?
Because when your public grief starts looking like an Adam and Eve commercial, that's not faith. That's branding. And it's gross. And the wild part is she's not being objectified. She's participating. She's found her place in the performance. The beautiful believer, the holy widow, the vessel for the message. Erica Kirk figured out how to turn devotion into influence. Not the loud kind, though. The curated, palatable kind. You know, the one that makes far-right politics look gentle. So here's the thing. Erica Kirk is not naive. She is strategic. But when your brand becomes a faith-based fairy tale, you start serving a system that'll never serve you back. Because to them, she's only as valuable as her pain. The second she stops crying on cue, the second she stops being useful, they'll find another soft-spoken believer to stand in the same light and call it revival.
So, as for lots of you who are sending me messages, trying to allude to that, I don't really know about that. But what I actually feel Brother Brennan is talking about, it's a scandal. And he likened it to the Watergate scandal and all those. I don't really think he was talking about the Erica Kirk, J.D. Vance thing that a lot of people are speculating about. But, I just want to hear from you, what do you think in the comments? I'll meet you in the next one as always. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to pray for President Trump. God bless you.